you know, I've been very fortunate to be able to make it to ESPN. And in terms of the journey itself, even once I got there, it wasn't always the easiest. My first day on the job, I was introduced to Keith Olbermann, who at the time I revered as being the guy who defined the discipline of performing on SportsCenter, and I still think that to this day, no matter what you may think, agree or disagree with Keith politically. In terms of doing SportsCenter, nobody in the history of the genre has ever done it better than he did. So I was psyched to meet this guy who's, you know, unbelievably intelligent. And so, you know, I stuck out my hand. He looked at my hand and he said, "Run, get out. There's still time to save your career and save your life." And you know, so that wasn't always the most encouraging thing. I'd been at ESPN 9 months. The show I'd been hired to do was on ESPN2 right after ESPN2 had come into existence. And I'd been there a month, and I was a reporter, you know, Sports Smash update anchor on the show, and I'd been there a month and the show got canceled. I didn't think that was a very good sign. So about 9 months into it, the guy who had recruited me to come to ESPN called me in the office and he said, "We would like for you to extend the window in your contract that gives us the option about when we're going to tell you whether we're renewing." So he was kind of dancing and talking around the subject, and I finally said, "Are you guys thinking about firing me?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Why?" He goes, "Well, it's nothing you've done." He said, "But, you know, the show doesn't exist anymore. We're not sure where we can use you and all of this." To make a very long story short, I went to every executive in the, and this, by the way, if you're going to be an executive, don't do this. We've got great executives at ESPN, but at this time, the guy who had made the decision was on vacation. I didn't know that at the time, and every executive I went to see was, "Well, I'd like to keep you, but you know, this guy over here, I don't know, maybe you need to talk to him." So I go around, and finally I get to the guy, and I said, "You know, what's the issue?" And he said, "Well, there's no issue." He said, I just asked them, you know, what we were going to do with you since the show's not here, and told them to find something or we'd have to go in a different direction." And I guess I should preface it by saying when I was hired at the time, you guys aren't old enough really, I don't know. Does anybody, Johnny, you probably remember this. You remember when ESPN2 started and they didn't let us wear ties and we all wore denim shirts and Olbermann wore a leather jacket and we all looked ridiculous? You remember that? Yeah. Okay. That's how it was on ESPN2 at the beginning. So when I was hired, I got this guy looked at me and he said, "Do not come and ask to do SportsCenter. We are not hiring any of you guys to do SportsCenter. We want ESPN2 to be a different, young, hip identity." And I thought, boy, you got the wrong guy if you want hip. But he said, "Don't come and ask to do SportsCenter." So unbeknownst to me, that's not the way broadcast works. You're supposed to ignore those rules. But of course, you know, being the nice, polite guy from Alabama, I listened and I didn't go ask. So finally, they're about to fire me. And so I told my boss this story that they told me not to ask to do SportsCenter. And I said, "Mr. Katz, do you really think anybody comes to ESPN to do a 1-minute sports smash? Everybody wants to do SportsCenter." So he said, "Well, okay, if they let you do SportsCenter, fine with me." So they did. And I think the one thing that has always made me against some of the more conservative members of my family politically, made me continue to defend Keith Olbermann, was after my very first SportsCenter. And I mean, you want to talk about pressure? I don't want to hear about A.J. McCarron's pressure, Nick Saban's pressure. You want to talk about pressure? How about doing a SportsCenter at 1 a.m. on Saturday night, knowing if you bomb it, you're out? And, okay, maybe they have a little more pressure than I do, but still. So I did the show. I thought it went well. I came back up. The message light was on the phone. I figured it was my mom or dad calling. And I picked up the phone, and it was Keith. And Keith and I hadn't become friends. The one conversation I told you about earlier was the only conversation we'd had in 9 months. And Olbermann said, "I just watched the show. You should be doing this. I'll be in management's office on Monday morning." Now, Keith had no idea I was about to be fired. None. And he said, "I'll be in management's office," and things proceeded and worked out from there. And I've been very blessed and fortunate from that point forward to continue to grow, do some things that I didn't love, like NASCAR. I developed an appreciation, but not a passion for it. I've been blessed to host some events that I previously did not understand at all, but it made you learn upon or learn how to use the education you had at Alabama, which I said the best thing I learned at Alabama was that it taught me how to learn. It didn't teach you how to be successful necessarily in broadcasting, but it taught you the fundamentals of how to learn to be successful. So when I did horse racing or World Cup or all of those things that I didn't, to me, were all paths to get to college football and college basketball, you were able to execute those at a high level. You perhaps get a reputation for being versatile, and hopefully, that's what's happened for me. And I've been at ESPN long enough now that now I get to do the things that I truly love. And it's a thrill to be able to, to cover national championship games. I shouldn't say this because somebody's going to tweet it, but it is fun to be able to do it when your alma mater's there. I'll admit that. But I think just to be part of the growth of this dominant sports media giant has been a great blessing for me.